Welcome to the realest podcast you'll ever listen to. I'm LT.
I'm Kiki.
And we're here to talk blunt.
Black ladies, unequivocally North Tulsa. Let's talk blunt talk. So LT, you ready to talk blunt?
I'm ready.
So what do you want to talk about today?
I want to talk about parenting. And let's look at it from a past, present, and future perspective.
Okay.
When I think about parenting and I look back at my parents and how they raised me, and then I think about how I raised my daughter, and then even future. First of all, so many things have changed in society that makes a difference in how we parent. My parents were, first of all, pretty much always authority. Our teachers were right, which I totally don't necessarily agree with. I can still, to this day, remember getting in trouble at school for something I did not do. The teacher calling my mother, she met me at the top of that hill. She didn't want to hear anything. She said, "I'll meet you when you get home." And what I got at home was worse than what I got at school. And at school wasn't any joke, because keep in mind, back in our day, teachers could still use paddles, and so it never was a voice in it. It was, do not let the school call me. If they call me, there's going to be consequences. Even my mother going to work, you did not call her at work unless there was a problem. There better be an emergency. Being sick from school, I mean, it just was, you better have a reason. We're going to the doctor's office. You better have a fever, and we're taking you to the doctor's office. You didn't say, "I'm sick and I don't feel like going to school today."
Yeah. I mean, the lessons they gave us were pretty interesting, because I remember being at church, and back then they passed the tray. You know, you had where they took a benevolence offering, right?
Yep.
And they would pass the tray, and I was watching the adults make change, like they take a $5.
I'm afraid to know what you did. I'm afraid to know.
They would take out $5, and then they put, they put in 5 and take 3 out, and then they pass the tray. So I'm thinking, that's an interesting concept. I'm about 6 years old. I'm like, I'm gonna make change for 25 cents. Literally in my head, I thought, and mind you, my mother's an usher, so she watching me like a hawk.
Yeah, she watching. Ushers got you.
I put my little accordion that she gave me for benevolence offering, which meant you put the whole thing in there, right? She gave me my little 50 cents or whatever, and I was supposed to put so much here, so much there. Right. You got Sunday school offering. You had all these offerings at the church, and she'd line up all my offerings before we left for church. And so I was giving my benevolence office, but I'm thinking, you know what? I can keep 15 cents if I just put a dime in there, and then I'll make some change. Girl, when I got home,
you was working at an early age, wasn't you? You was figuring out how to work it.
She looked at me, came through there, put that quarter in there. I mean, just like that. I was like, okay. But those were how we were taught our lessons. It was a village type of a thing. It wasn't like, I'm going to get you when we get home. It was right in the moment.
We're getting you right now.
I mean, I learned right then and there. Number one, don't make change out of benevolence for your quarter. You're supposed to put the whole 25 cents in there. Right. And number two, when we got home, she reiterated that if I give you something for church as a donation or offering, it's for church, not for you to try to build your savings for candy later. So I just think those were the type of parenting skills in the past that we were able to kind of learn from quickly.
That's right. And you didn't fall out on the floor and have a fit about things.
Well, you did, but you still got told.
Well, if you did, there's going to be consequences for that as well.
Yeah.
When you were talking about that, I thought about an incident. We didn't always have a washer and dryer in the home growing up. Matter of fact, I don't think we got one until I was like in middle school. And so we went to the laundromat every Monday and Thursday. It was like going to church. It was religious
every week.
And sometimes I'd get a little sideways, and Mama, I want some snacks. Mama, I want to play the video game. And it's a certain look. And she done told you no, and don't ask me no more. And I keep coming. you get whatever's in her hand. You
Mhm.
get whatever's in
Mhm.
her hand. Didn't I tell you? It wasn't later you're going to get it. It's right now you're going to get it. I think some of those things I personally can say I carried over into parenthood, and some of those things I left behind.
I agree.
Um,
I think when you talk about parenting at the present, like where we
right.
are,
Mm-hmm.
there are definitely some things that I feel like my mother did what she knew was best.
Right.
But
Right.
with all of the things that are accessible to us now, and
Right.
when I started having children, it was different than when
Right.
she was trying to
Right.
raise us.
Right. Right. Now, I didn't want the school calling me.
Mm-mm.
Don't be calling me. If I got to leave work, there's a problem. We're going to talk about it. That doesn't necessarily mean that the call is always right. And I'm going to encounter and I'm going to get to the facts. I'm not going to assume, but we still got to have a talk about why I had to get the call.
Well, and one of the things that we tried to do with our kids was to assess when you call mom and daddy and
Right.
when you handle it on your own. One of the things we missed out on in the past was there was so much authority and
Mhm.
that oversight in what you did. It influenced how you made decisions almost as an adult. You
Right.
wanted approval
Right.
in certain stages where you needed to be able to make a decision.
Mhm.
And so when my husband and I started rearing our children, one of the things we agreed upon was they need to be able to make decisions at a very early age, as young as 2 and 3. When they would ask for something, we would go, okay, if you have this ice cream now, you won't be able to
That's
have
right.
ice cream after dinner. So
That's
you
right.
need to choose. Do you want to have your ice
Now.
cream at 11 after lunch, or do you
Mhm.
want to have your ice cream, at 7:30 once you eat? And those were those. And then we stuck to, if they chose, okay, I want the ice cream now, and then they started asking for later, we stuck to, okay, but you already had it and you made that decision.
Correct.
So that was when we were looking at our kids in school, we really thought about empowering them, giving them the opportunity to know when to call mom and daddy into a situation. And we felt that was important for them to be able to have some type of say, when we intervened.
Mhm.
Because what we learned is our parents were doing the best they could with
Right.
what they had. I'll share a story of my aunt. My mom died when I was young. My oldest daughter, she was about 4 or 5, and it was the winter, and I wanted to build that extra layer of protection. So I always thought they gave us castor oil to help fight off, different. And so I'm ready to give her this big old, serving of castor oil. And before I did it, something said, talk to your auntie.
Thank you, Jesus.
So I talked to my aunt, and it just so happened I was going to see her that weekend. I said, I was thinking about giving Liz some castor oil. She said, what? You can get that baby? What? No, I don't do that. I was like, but you all did. She said, Kim, we did what we thought we knew to do at that time, but it doesn't mean it was the right thing. We did the best we had.
I'm going to say thank you for Miss Liz right now. Thank you.
Yeah, she would say thank you too.
Yeah. Oh. But how many myths? I mean, what was the drink they used to give you for a cold? And God knows it would knock anything out.
Creel Motion.
Yes.
It was horrible.
I mean, there were a lot of things they did. To her point, you did what you had to do at that moment, but we learned from
it was an elixir,
from that.
Whatever an elixir.
Yeah, exactly.
But hey, it did not.
It did not. Well, it knocked anything out. What else did it knock out? Exactly. But I think what you described is that we're raising our kids to be able to be more independent and to make decisions, not necessarily that every decision we need to make for them. And so you're raising them over the years to be able to be functional in society. And at the age that they are, you give a little bit of leeway. You continue to do that, as they show the ability to be able to handle the decisions. And that gets into, I think, another point too, which is that every child is different. And so this one may be able to handle this at this age. This one may not be able to handle it at that age. So I think that's another piece that comes into it too. But so we think about how we raised our kids, and we think about where we're going right now. Right now, today, I mean, there's a lot of times I turn on the news and I'm looking at things and I'm thinking, thank you, my child is grown.
But you're gonna have grandkids one day.
I know.
So it's
But
it's
that's her
perpetual.
problem, not mine. That's her problem, not mine. But yes, my point is, it's like, it has to be so impossible for these parents. Not impossible, but it's very challenging for parents today with everything that is going on in society.
And you know, you sound like your mama right now, right?
Okay.
Y'all gonna have such a hard time raising them children. I mean, that's just basically what they told us, right? How you gonna raise your children with all this technology? So, I mean, it's just we have to.
Let me have a Dorothy moment if I want to.
Let you be dramatic. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll let you be dramatic.
Go right ahead. I'm just saying.
But I'm just saying, you know, we can't take that doomsday approach that they took with us, right? Because it was like, oh my God, MTV. I remember when that came out, my mom was like, that's the devil's workshop. I'm like, it's a music video. I'm not seeing the devil at work. But that was her thing, you know. And now I look at MTV and I'm like,
she wasn't that far from being wrong. I'm just saying.
No.
She wasn't that far.
She rolling right now because MTV. But anyway, I digress. I'm just saying, it was an outlet. One of the things I remember about TV during that time is there was a lot of awareness around AIDS, or a lot of awareness around wearing condoms, conversations that I wasn't getting at home that I needed to hear. Right. So there is a place for media. And I think, you know, a lot of parents, when you talk about the future, one of the struggles you hear that, you know, on the news is the social media time and how you monitor, you know, the social media, how it's influencing and making children feel, and teenagers, and that impact of social media that, I'll be honest, you know, Snapchat showed up. I think my oldest was maybe junior high. So I kind of eased into the social media piece, but it's not in your face now. Now you see people at the store with small children, you know, 3 to 5, and they're, you know, TikToking away, scrolling, you know, watching different things. So I think that that's something that as a mom, I didn't have to look at. I do think that there are boundaries that as parents, we have to place on ourselves and on our children, and help our children understand, I'm giving you this boundary because I want you to be safe. Right. Versus, you know, I'm giving you this boundary because I said so. Children nowadays have so many outlets. I think that you have to be aware of when, what, you know, we had a little Einstein. I sit up in front of that and just go. It was just music, you know, but there are so many different things now that influence children that parents have to consider. And I think, you know, those are the things that they have to balance: when to introduce social media, when to purchase your child a cell phone, when to have certain conversations with your children. It's different than when we were raising our kids.
So I agree with you. I really originally wasn't really talking about technology, but I agree with you. And so since you went there with the technology, it's very interesting, because one of the facts here that I was reading was that the average American family spends just 37 minutes of quality time together per day during the week. 37 minutes. If you think about, I mean, first of all, we had to eat dinner together. Like when dinner was done, you came. 43% of American families eat dinner together every day, while 57% of families report sharing meals together sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, even for me raising my daughter, it wasn't always dinner time together. And then one other thing that I had read, so almost 40% of parents indicate that the screen time is more of a priority than family time in their households.
Well, and you know, you have to take studies like that with a grain of salt, because you never know who all got interviewed.
And there you go.
but
we can relate to these facts.
We can relate to those facts, yes.
But I say it was a research that I didn't tell you what the end was. I just said.
I just have to put that out there. Okay. But I think, you know, that's where boundaries come in. Right. You know, as a parent, one of the things that I did when we would go out, especially because eating out for us was a big thing. when I was a kid and for my kids, because my husband worked nights, I worked days. And so when we had that family time and we were all together, we really tried our best to keep our electronics, So one of the things that I still do is when we're eating, if we're all there, it's no electronics at the table. You put in your purse or your pocket, whatever, turn your cell phones off or put them on vibrate, which theirs is already on vibrate anyway. But that's one of the ways you can preserve some of your family time. That worked for us most of the time. It not necessarily when the rule got broken, I'll be honest, it was probably me breaking it to respond to an email or something from work.
I was actually just thinking that it's really hard for as adults to, I don't want to say promote that because I think we do promote that, but it's hard to enforce that when we're the ones who, right, exactly. Which gets to another factor there. 34% of parents feel too busy to enjoy family time, and 28% say work prevent them to spend time. So a lot of the times it is us sometimes that's introducing the screen time, social media into it. But I think we have to find that balance when we're trying to raise a family. First of all, even outside of all the things that can raise our children, we never want to look back and we've missed that time. You never want to look back, and because you're only going to get that time once. You can't bring them back in their youth. So that's the first thing I think that we have to be mindful of. Then the second thing is we want to make sure that we are raising them, and the influences of social media is not raising them. The influence of all the things that can influence our kids in this day and time is not raising our children. Because it is a lot to contend with that we did not have today. Just from even how you dress, how you talk, how you act, all the different world trends, I'll say, that goes into it. It's just a lot that impacts parenting as well. Not even just the influence on the children, but even on the parents and their style parenting. I was pretty sure my daughter hated me growing up. I was pretty sure she did, but I can tell you she don't today. And I can tell you that it didn't take more than a couple of years for her to get into college and understand that there was reasons why me and her dad did and said the things that we did.
Yeah, and I'll agree with. I remember one of the things that stands out to me when I think I had one on my hip and one walking, and then I was pushing one in the stroller. I had a lady come up to me just out of the blue, and she said, you think they need you now? They're going to need you a lot more when they get older. And I thought, okay, I'm changing diapers, I'm bathing, I'm feeding. How much more are they going to need me? But that was in that mommy moment at that time. I reflect now as my children are older, and I reflect back on that wisdom that she gave me in that snapshot of a moment.
Yep.
That was her saying what you had said just a minute ago. Enjoy this time.
Enjoy it.
It seems like it's hard now, but they're going to need you as they get older. Right. And so I think that, some of what you're saying is when you're raising and seeing your children, it's okay to have boundaries. Mm-hmm. They'll appreciate them more. We were laughing, my husband and I, because it was about 8:30, 9 o'clock, and we still got all our kids at home because, they're making their way in the neighborhood. But
it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
Anyway, we looked up and I was like, it's 9 o'clock. Everybody in the bed. And my daughter comes through. She's like, yeah, y'all put us in the bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock all our life. Expect for us to stay up late. So they, and that was one of those things we struggled with. Mm-hmm. Because we were so structured around bedtime. Yeah. But we both agreed that children needed to get that 10-hour plus rest, especially once they started school and everything. Yeah. And even when they were so wiry, they jump out of bed. We were still very adamant about, even though you don't have to go to sleep, just rest your body, lay down. It's time to rest. And so it was kind of funny. We looked at each other and thought, okay, well, that works. We'll cross fingers on the rest. But I just think you have to, I go back to the wisdom that my aunt gave me. You do the best you can with what you have.
Yep.
So for parents of the future and those parents who are raising children now, I think you do the best you can, and you still have that village approach if you have a village. If you don't, there are other resources, counseling services, things of that nature that can help you if you feel frustrated, or like you're just not doing what you think you should do. There is no book that when you have your kid, okay, here is your parenting book.
Nope, there's
sign
not
here.
a book. There's books,
Thank
but
you.
they don't always get you there.
It's nothing that's going to walk you through all the things you need to know.
That's right.
You just have to constantly, your faith, whatever your faith is, your belief, lean on your faith, and also just lean, into your family and your friends, and seek that inner voice that you have, and trust that voice. If it's saying, your kids don't need to go to this party, maybe you listen to that voice.
That's right.
And even if they, I really want to go, everybody's going, okay, well, we're going to do something different today.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to set those boundaries if that's a part of, what your system and belief is, because you have to raise your family according to the resources that you have available to you.
So one other thing that you said that really caught my attention is that you still had children at home.
Mm-hmm.
And
all of them.
I don't think that's a bad thing. I think sometimes we rush to leave home. Sometimes we rush to get them out of the home, whatever the reasons are. But I think if a child is doing what they need to do and they're trying to better themselves, as long as they are, now I'm still old school, you got to be abiding by the rules in the house. You can't be walking up in my house at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, disrupting me.
You still got a curfew.
You still got, Mm-hmm. But as long as you're willing to abide by the rules, like, to me, they need to be able to stay there and give them the help and the support they need, because I feel like that's so many times why we end up out there. We're in debt. We've got all kind of things. And so we need to help them to be able to get to where they're going and get there freely without all the baggage and the things that they can bring along. Like I said, it all goes with respect, because you can't be up in my house, being disrespectful. So that's the first piece. You got to be doing the right thing. But as long as you're trying to do the right thing, I think it is okay for them to be there and for us to help them. And because so many times I think that's why our children end up in the situations that they're in, because they jump out there too fast.
I see that, yes. As a matter of fact, a colleague shared with me about a week or two ago that his son had chosen to come home and not go to college. He was in college. He decided to stop out, come home, work for a while. And he said, you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, as long as what you just said. As long as there's respect and there's contribution. And I think, again, it's what the family values are. His was, you need to be contributing.
Right.
You're an adult now. This isn't you coming home to kick it with mom and daddy. Right. This is you coming home to figure out your next step. Right. And we're here to support that. And here's how you can support the house. Yeah. And I agree, there has to be boundaries when you have adult children living with you.
Right.
They need to be able to respect the house rules, and you also need to be able to give them some freedom. But again, Correct. There's that balancing act of them being an adult and you being a parent, and thinking that they're still not going to take all your advice.
Right.
They're still, and that's not a condition of them being in the home. It's you doing what I told you to do.
Right.
When it comes to certain things. So I think there's boundaries on both sides of it, but I think there's a lot of positive outcomes to generational living. Some cultures have done it for years.
Absolutely. They have.
And I think economy is kind of forcing us to do some of that now.
That's right.
The prices of houses and cars and everything is so expensive. You don't want your children to be in debt. But I do think there's healthy boundaries. There's a time and a place when there's an independence. And I think every family is different. There's certain things that parents need support with once their children get older. And it works both ways. So I just think it's a balancing act.
So lastly, I'm going to touch on, because I know you've got 2 boys.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I haven't had to encounter that, because all I've got is the daughter.
Mm-hmm.
but you've got two boys. What challenges do you feel like you face in America with all that has gone on that we've seen with, our African American males specifically, losing their lives needlessly, really to say. It's a gamut of emotions. I mean, it's first of all, it's injustice in many cases, but there's also things that I feel like we have to teach them. And I know you say I'm conservative, but there are things that we have to teach them so that they don't find themselves in certain situations. But what do you find is challenging, and what have you and your husband?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I think me and my husband take it from different perspectives, obviously
Surely
being a
not.
Black female. Yeah. But I go back to the Trayvon Martin story where,
Yeah.
15, I think he was, walking through his parents' neighborhood and shot down basically for wearing a hoodie.
Wearing a hoodie.
And at that moment, that was, I hate to say the first time because I don't think it was, but that was a pivotal moment for me as the mother of Black men, because that was the first time, because my son was a little bit younger than Trayvon at that time. And I was like, wow, it hit close to home. And he loved, still does, both my boys love to wear hoodies. And I remember one Christmas, one of my friends, she had bought my son a hoodie. He's a big Saints fan, and so she bought him some hoodie. And
Poor
I
child.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I tried to make him a Cowboys. That's another story. So anyway, I immediately went on the defensive, and I said, "You can't do this. You
Yeah.
can't buy him a hoodie." And she has she's an only child. She has a daughter, and she was like, "What do you mean?" I said, "You can't. Don't you know about?" And I literally was like limiting my child's wardrobe
Right.
based on what might happen. And she was like, "You can't do that." And she was right. And that was a moment that I had to talk through, and we talked it through with her, and I talked it through with my husband. And ultimately, me and my husband have made the stance of just preparing our boys as much as we can. Tell them to be smart, respect authority. That's regardless. Don't allow yourself to be put into a position where you feel like, but if you find yourself in an unjust position, then remain calm, call us as soon as possible. And it really is. I mean, I remember during the George Floyd time, my husband was riding with his wallet on top of the dashboard. The boys had a strict curfew, and my husband even went as far as, because there was so much going on around police and kind of that whole community trust. And he actually took the boys to a police station in Fort Worth. And he basically, his thing was, he wanted them to, one, understand what it would be like for a police officer to approach him when they weren't in trouble or weren't being stopped, not associating police with trouble, so to speak. And I don't know, he just wanted them to see police for humans, and not everything that was going on TV at the time.
Right.
So it was meant really to help them be safe.
Right.
Because that police officer doesn't know them, but in their mind, they were being taught how to remain safe, to be safe and have a safe place when you're in this space. And so, raising Black men is just, it's one of those things, you can't keep your kids in a bubble.
Right.
It's like raising a child in general. Kind of like having I like growing plants, and you get so far with the plant and you just gonna have to wait and see what it does, because it may go off to the left, it may go off to the right. You raise your children, you have to trust that everything you've piled into them, and all the nutrients and all the love and community that you've given them over the years will lead them on paths that will, keep them on that path that you hope for them, or what's best for their life and what they want for themselves. Because I think a lot of time as parents, we can interject ourselves into our children's lives, and we have to come to a realization that they have to live their own life. And so it just is one day at a time. But I think as parents raising boys, and you do with the best that you can with the resources you have. And at that moment in time during George Floyd scenario, we wanted our boys to understand how important it was for them to remain safe. And so one of the ways to do that was to allow them to be around police and understand their purpose in the community and understand how to conduct themselves. We have several relatives in my family that are police officers, and so they've also been influential in, you know, telling them and helping them maneuver that space.
Well, I think you definitely helped walk us through the past, the present, and the future, taking us back on down some painful memories, because I remember the Trayvon Martin. I mean, that was one that I think just really had impact and really changed really how America really looked at the injustices altogether. So definitely looking at it, coming all the way forward to George Floyd, and once again, one that just really rocked the nation. First of all, I like that you said that getting them to understand and have that relationship and understanding of a police officer when they're not in trouble, I think is a great strategy to think about. I also think, though, just, you know, youth in general, but especially with our males, helping them to understand, and you touched on this, authority. And even when you feel that you're being wrong in that moment, you may need to hold your peace, and then you go about it in a different manner to fight it, because at that time, it's probably not going to be in the best benefit. And so being very careful not to put yourself in a situation that allows you to, well, and I say that, and, you know, as soon as I say that, there's scenarios I start to think about where it wasn't a situation, because, you know, I go back to Trayvon Martin that's just walking home.
Well, you know, there's stories where literally Black men have been disclosing, hey, there's a gun in the car. And so that's the thing, is you don't know. There, you know, during that time there were several incidents, and I don't want to start naming because I may forget.
Absolutely.
But there were several instances of young Black men in various situations where they were just gunned down, even females, you know, in their homes. And so I just think it's one of those things, you just want to educate your child.
Educate, that's it.
It's, you know, because I don't want to associate being in trouble with being a Black man, because that's
Absolutely.
not it at all.
Absolutely.
But it's just educating them and giving them those pieces of information that you can, to say, hey, get home to mama safe. You know, whatever the situation is, just try to get home to me safely, and we will deal with it as expeditiously as possible. And sometimes that may mean holding your peace, but it also doesn't mean that you lose your dignity in that
Absolutely.
moment.
Absolutely.
You stay true to who you are, and that's a balancing act, you know. And I think that's, as a woman, you know, I've seen my son, because he's 6'3", he's tall, and when he was 14 years old, someone getting into the elevator and moving over in this, like, oh my gosh, she's so big. And then asking, are you a football player? And he's like, yes, ma'am. And seeing him kind of try and make himself smaller because he is such a large guy. And in that, you know, as a woman, I don't have to do that. Right. But as a mother, seeing that, I want to be able to tell him it's okay to be yourself. And it's okay to be 6'3" and 200 pounds and not, you know, and be respectful in your space, because you can't change who you are. And so we've gone a long way in talking to him, and my husband talks to them probably way more than I do, about just staying safe, being respectful of females, just being respectful in general as young men.
So in closing, can we agree that probably some of the best things we can do is educate? And of course, I'm also a firm believer, as my daughter always laughs at me, when nothing else fails, pray.
Yeah.
Educate them and pray for them.
That's what you got to do.
That's blunt talk.
Blunt talk.